It's the final word. Adam Collins, Daniel Norcross, we're with you. Where I'm going to start this very quick rapid round is with the Irish women. What a remarkable week in Irish cricket history. The women had never beaten Sri Lanka before. Now they've beaten them 3 times on the trot. Last week was the T20 at Pembroke. These 2 one-dayers, what cracking games at Stormont. They've had to hold their nerve. They won the first one by 3 wickets with 4 balls to spare. And that wasn't an easy game of cricket, by the way. Sri Lanka set them 261. It was Ireland's best ever chase in a women's one-dayer. That's after Vishmi Gurratne made 101. But Atapatu out for a golden duck from the bowling of Orla Pendergast. Now, Pendergast is a gun. You've seen her play domestic cricket, so have I. 22 years old, she's the coming superstar, takes 3 for 35 opening the bowling, then comes in the chase and rattles off 122 not out from 107 balls. It's one of the great one-day performances ever, isn't it? 3 for 25, nicking off one of the best players in the world, the opposition's captain, first ball, and then an unbeaten 1-2-2 for the first time Ireland's women had ever beaten Sri Lanka in a one-dayer. It's a monumental achievement.
It is a monumental achievement. Let me first put it into perspective. Thanks to Hypercourse on Blue Sky, incidentally, he posted this. Bilateral ODI series wins for Ireland women. Their very first one was in 2000, 4-0 against Pakistan. Pakistan women's cricket in 2000 was really not up to much.
Only started 3 years before, 1997.
Correct. 2-0 against Netherlands in 2006. And now you have to job all the way up to 2021. For their next win. 3-1 against Zimbabwe, 3-0 against Netherlands in 2022, 2-1 against Scotland in 2023, 2-0 against Zimbabwe in 2024, 2-0 with a game to go against Sri Lanka in 2024. Now, we know Nathan Johns well, and he was in a little bit of concern about Irish women's cricket because of the failure to qualify for the Women's T20 World Cup. Scotland getting in there instead. But you'll have to admit, I mean, look, there's been 5 bilateral series wins by Ireland in the last 3 years. And before that, there were only 2 in their previous history. As for Orla Prendergast, good player doesn't do her justice. I saw her hit a 6 at Cape Town in the Women's T20 World Cup last year, was it? Or year before? I can't remember. Last year, which went an absolute mile. It was a shot I'll never forget. It went into the stands, high into the stands. It was a proper 6. It was a meaty 6. She can bowl, she can field, she can bat. She's a star player. I'm kind of stunned she wasn't playing in the 100. I think she's got to get picked up for that. And I'm going to give you a little insight. I saw her in an airplane. We were in an airplane together, and she got up before she should do at the end to get her bags out of the overhead locker, and there was a lot of tutting from South Africans. So she's got balls as well. She'll run the gamut of tutting South Africans just to get her bag down from the overhead locker. But she is a truly tremendous player, and if she wasn't playing for Ireland, if the English had nicked her, as they have done so many players from places like Ireland over the years, you would struggle to keep her out of the England side. And the England side at the moment is pretty strong. She's a proper seam bowling all-rounder who bats at 3 in the best lineup for me. She bats at 3, and she can bowl a full allocation. And arguably, she's their best quick bowler. I mean, she's a phenomenon.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So Orla Prendergast, a player in a hurry. And the way they managed the chase as well. I mean, I love this. Like they needed to go at about 9s or something for the last 3 overs. And that Yudhishika Prabhadani, who's a bowler we've seen a bit of in fair break, she takes 18 runs off the 48th, 10 off the 49th, and does get a couple of singles in the 50th. Like it was mature cricket, right? And that might inform why when Gabby Lewis was missing for the second one day through injury, they made Prendergast captain. So she's captained Ireland for the first time in the second game and didn't have a day out herself this time, but they won by 15 runs. They made it 255 for 5. Now, Lee Paul, 81, Rebecca Stokel, 53 not out, that big push towards the end to get them above 250. 2 24-year-olds with somewhere between 50 and 70 matches under their belt. This is what you get when you invest. This is what you get. I remember when New Zealand rocked up in Ireland in 2018, and there was the Amelia Kerr 232 not out from memory, world record scores all over the place. And it was all a bit embarrassing for Ireland. It was like it was a club team playing against an international team. that was the year when they first gave out part-time contracts, right? Like there is a through line between countries' administrators realizing they need to invest and then getting these sort of results when players are getting, as I mentioned before, 50 to 70 or thereabouts one days. And the same applied with the ball. They bowled out Sri Lanka for 240. And in that reply, or that defence, I should say, Arlene Kelly, 30-year-old, so she's not a spring chicken in cricket terms, but she's played 61 times for Ireland before this game. So there's a build here. It's a progression of things. And, winning this second game by 15 runs, having gone up 2-0 in the series, a chance to whitewash Sri Lanka, who've won 3 bilateral series themselves this year, including one against the aforementioned New Zealand, and England. This time last year, they beat England in a T20 series, Sri Lanka over here. So, onwards. And they're the first one days that Ireland have won since being admitted to the ICC Women's Championship. After 12 losses on the trot, 2 big wins at home. They can sweep it when they play tomorrow. We'll look back at this week as the moment when the Irish women really did arrive. Yet they won't be at the World Cup, and that's disappointing. But that World Cup, those World Cups are growing. We've seen that announced by the ICC in the last 6 weeks or so. So, yeah, huge step in the right direction. Thrilled for them.
And one last point on that is it's nearly 12 months ago now that Sri Lanka themselves pulled off an epoch-making series victory by beating England.
That's right.
For the first time in a T20 series. So what it speaks to is just how women's cricket is a shifting landscape, such a quickly shifting landscape that you think you know what you're talking about, and within 6 months, you don't.
And across the Irish Sea, of course, sticking with women's cricket, we had the 100 finals on the weekend, and it was the London domination. It was the Spirit, who are the club that are based at Lords and have that MCC ownership, who beat your lot, the Oval Invincibles, in the elimination final, or the eliminator, hate that word, at the Oval on the Saturday with Charlie Dean and Sarah Glenn with the ball. Then Georgia Redmayne, who she's been a final word fave for years, made 53 not out. I think Matt Roller was tweeting that she was the cheapest overseas buy in the whole tournament, and that's great shopping from Fraser Stewart, our mate at MCC, who runs the list for the Spirit, that they've picked up someone at the cheaper price as an overseas, but it's really worked out for them. She top scored in both the semi-final and subsequently the final. And not even Amanda Jade Wellington, who was on the podcast last week with Jeff, another final word fave, could do it for the Invincibles and keep them in it. And then in the final, Daniel, they went back across the river, had the home draw, if you like, playing the Welsh Fire. The Welsh Fire only got 115 in their 100 balls. The highlights there for the Spirit was Charlie Dean bowling a maiden in a 100-ball game, which is quite unusual. And then Eva Gray, who's a Surrey player, and Sarah Glenn combining spin to win. Jonathan made 54 for the Welsh, but the Spirit got there in really exciting fashion as well. Deepti Sharma hitting the third last ball of the game for 6 to get them over the line. Great video that Henry Moran put up of the reaction shot of them in the dugout when they realised they'd won. Heather Knight's team, it was made possible due to Danny Gibson smacking 22 in 9 balls to break it open. And I mentioned Redmayne top scoring, making 34. 22,000 people there, Daniel. We don't talk a lot about the 100. It's not really Jeff and my vibe. You've covered quite a lot of it in the last few seasons, but significant for the Spirit, who've been a side across the men and women's divisions who've struggled, who've now won one of those big H trophies, and it's been through their women, first of all.
It's a cliche to say it that the 100's been excellent for the women's game, and the jury's not even necessarily really out for the men's game. But it has been unbelievable for the women's game. And but the way I describe it is essentially the 100 is the perfect fusion of the WPL and the WBBL. The WBBL has got great domestic players, and so the quality of the cricket is really high, but it's played in front of next to no one, with no razzmatazz and very little engagement, which is sort of heartbreaking, really, when you look at the quality of players on show. By comparison, the WPL, on the other hand, is getting significant crowds in iconic venues, but the quality of the cricket is less good because Indian domestic cricket is not yet as good, and it will get better, but it currently isn't. So what you get in the 100 is that kind of perfect fusion, and 22,000 people. It's so significant for so many reasons. It undermines a very antediluvian argument that a lot of cricketers have, a lot of male cricketers have, who haven't really woken up and smelt the coffee yet, which is that, we're just subsidizing the women's game. They're not good enough and things like that. Well, 22,000 people are prepared to come and watch. It's because they're watching that product, and their eyeballs are on, and the advertisers are getting paid as a result, and the broadcasters are having people watch that product, which again feeds more money into the game. and it justifies, as if it needed justifying beyond the moral argument, but it justifies on an economic argument that there is real clout to be had in the women's game. As for how the Spirit got there, I remain gutted to this day. They tied with the Oval Invincibles when the Invincibles needed something like 4 off 9 balls, and poor old Rhiannon McDonald-Gay couldn't lay a bat on it, and they eventually scrambled to a tie. And that 1 point was the difference, ultimately, between the Invincibles finishing top and knocking out the London Spirit, and them actually finishing second and third, and that's why they eventually played in that eliminator. What is noticeable is that Heather Knight, as captain, I think it's taken a little while to blend that team into something that had a game plan that was repeatable, and they found it in the last 4 or 5 games of that tournament, and then they started to be a really significant force. Dipti Sharma ended up with a ridiculous average of over 200 because she was only out once. Her winning 6 was nearly caught by Shabnam Ismail on the boundary. The crowd went completely berserk. I'm not going to relitigate arguments about the 100. What I will say is that the women's 100 is a terrific product, and it's a fantastic place to showcase the very best players. And for the first time, really, we've had the full coterie of the best Australians in as well, which has made a big difference, as well as Dipti Sharma and Smriti Mandana, and just the improving quality of English domestic players, because they've now become way more professionalised. And so you have something that works really, really well.
Yeah, Heather Knight said that about Danny Gibson. The system produces a player like Danny Gibson who can take the ownership of a situation like that at the end. And I expect we'll see more from her for England. And Meg Lanning, as you mentioned, the full complement of Australians, was on the winning team too. With the men, there was a title eliminator on Friday. Sorry, make that Saturday at the Oval with the Brave and the Phoenix. They had a super over or a super 5, which Jofra Archer bowled and basically won it for the Brave. So they get to the Oval. Well, sorry, they get to the Lords to play Oval. It's always jarring saying Oval as a team name anyway. And Oval Invincibles go back-to-back. They won by 17 runs. Will Jacks top scored with 37 in a hurry. Tom Curran runs down the list. They made 147 for 9, and the Brave was 17 short. The reason is Saqib Mahmood bowled a stunning spell. Had the ball swinging around, possibly reverse, couldn't quite tell, but it was 3 for 17. Deploy, Evans and Pollard was a golden duck, all in the space of 6 balls between balls 72 and 78, and that was at the point when they were launching the Brave and they were cut off at the pass by Saqib Mahmood, and that's a significant thing for English cricket because, well, you go back 2 to 3 years and he was the coming man and injuries got in the way of that, but let's hope there's a career ahead for this guy playing for England as well, because he's clearly got a very high ceiling.
Yeah, and you could tell in his interview afterwards that he's a bit peeved because he hadn't played the last couple of years with injury, and he's stuck with the Oval Invincibles, who have, intriguingly, in a tournament which sees quite a lot of movement between the different franchises, the Oval Invincibles managed to keep a core of around about 8 players, of which one of them was Saqib, but he hadn't played for the last couple of years, and then he was overlooked for Spencer Johnson, basically, really, because the Invincibles wanted to play the all-rounders, the 2 Currans, and then the spinners, Adam Zampo, who had an extraordinarily, I say extraordinarily, no surprise, but a really good season, alongside Nathan Souter, who's a lovely story.
Great story,
and complemented by Will Jacks. That was your bowling attack, so it was hard for Saqib to get in. Then Spencer Johnson got injured, and he looked really sharp. I mean, that spell, that 3 for spell, broke the game, and it was legitimate as well. It wasn't like, all caught at deep mid wicket or anything like that. And it was at a point when you would say that the Brave were just on top, just having been behind, then they got on top, and then they were blown away. Just one last point though on maidens in the 100. I've got a name for it. So in Cockney rhyming slang, a fiver is a Lady Godiva, right? Who famously rode naked through Coventry. So it's completely obvious that a 5-ball set with no runs in it is naked of runs. It's got to be called a Godiva.
I like it. Let's try and get it going next year. The other domestic men's tournament that's been at the business end of the Metro Bank Cup, which is the 50th tournament over here.
Fever!
Semi-final stage was, yesterday. It was Sunday the 18th. Somerset defeated last year's champs Leicestershire by 23 runs at Taunton. Somerset 334 for 4. Lewis Goldsworthy, 115 not out from 86 balls, batting with James Rue, who made 71. Leicestershire 311 for 9 in reply. Petey Hanscom got 111, but it wasn't enough for them. So that was after Leicestershire won their quarterfinal on a paywalled stream. Now, Jeff and I did that last week, and that went out on social media, and that did numbers, as they say, because we were arguing vociferously that you should not paywall domestic cricket in England. And a lot of people came back to me and said, but what about the BBC commentary? You can't commercialise it if you've got the BBC comms. I'm like, yes, I understand that, but this is the kind of the whole point. You've got to invest and spend to employ your own commentary team in order to make it commercially sellable and saleable. And other counties have worked this out. We work for one of the streams that have done precisely that. So anyway, I don't want to go back over old ground, but to answer about 10 comments that came my way about the BBC comms, that is why the only way of commercialising it clearly, because the BBC is a state-owned broadcaster, is to do it the other way. And that's not to say the BBC commentary shouldn't be there. It provides an enormously important service on radio, like any radio coverage does. But you have to divorce the two if you want to find a way to make these streams profitable and become, over time, something that adds to the budget bottom line rather than something that at the moment is seen as a cost rather than an investment.
What I want to say just briefly on that, though, is that Sean Jarvis, the chief executive there at Leicester, was very transparent in the process, and he was very clear on Twitter what it was he was doing, and he was asking for feedback, and he was engaging with people who disagreed. And whether you agree with what the experiment was or not, I found it refreshing that at least it wasn't just imposed and then, well, you don't understand how difficult it is. He did it, and he said, right, we're going to take your feedback and we're going to look at that. And bear in mind, as you would have discussed, Leicestershire doesn't have anything like the same amount of money as Surrey. So I thought that it was, I wouldn't do it, but I thought it was handled as a process considerably more engagingly than simply imposed, as some county chairman might have done on their fans.
Yeah, it's a chicken and the egg thing. And I agree. I think, and look, we spoke about Sean Jarvis with Ben Bloom earlier in the year, and clearly he's a forward-thinking administrator, and they're doing it in no small part due to the Rahane factor. And good on them having a crack at doing something different. But yeah, anyway. The other semi-final, Glamorgan beat Warwickshire by 39 runs yesterday at Cardiff. Very different kind of game. It was 247 for 9 for Glamorgan, which they bit old school, really. Ed Barnard took 4 wickets early. He's had a great tournament again. Surprised he's not in the 100. Will be next year. Ingram and Billy Root saved the day for Glamorgan in the middle overs. And then they bowled out Warwickshire for 208. Michael Burgess made 85, but not much else. Jamie McElroy took 3, and Dan Douthwaite took 2. Now, this is a chance for Glamorgan, Daniel. I saw Douthwaite jump out at me because we commentated on Glamorgan's last trophy win, which was the Quarantine Cup in 2020, the video games that we were doing commentary on, where Glamorgan won the trophy, and we got vaguely emotional about the whole thing when we were doing it. We were so fucking starved of cricket, and it was the Dan Douthwaite character who was player of the match in that final. So, can he replicate his heroics at Trent Bridge in the final on whatever it is, the 22nd of September? Let's hope so, for Glamorgan's sake.
I hope so. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's kind of mad to think, isn't it, now? But we did. we forgot that it was a video game. Dan Douthwaite, this man mountain, this young man with a future ahead of him. He could go from strength to strength. He's a virtual Dan Douthwaite, Dan. But yeah.
Just a couple of the last domestic thing I'll say, County Championship back on Thursday in Divi 1. Surrey Lancs will be the game most people are watching, I'd imagine, because Surrey have a chance to improve the lead that they grew over Essex, beating them before the break, but Somerset slotting in between. So Somerset playing away against Warwickshire, who are currently
who's going to play for Surrey? Who's left?
Zone. Yeah,
who's left?
A lot of players.
Because Sean Abbott's been taken away from them. I don't know the status of Kimar Roach. I don't know whether he's going to get back. Obviously, there'll be Dan Worrell, there'll be Tom Laws, but the batting, you'd imagine Ryan Patel will be in there. But will Jacks, will Sam Curran play a red ball game?
Yeah, rare as it is. So they've got five games. Well, it's 5 games in 5 weeks. You have to manage your resources too. You can't just play. It's improbable the guys who are in international frames will just play every game. That's Divi 1. Divi 2, Sussex and Middlesex are in the promotion spots at the moment, but Sussex are way ahead. Then Middlesex have got a number of teams with them. And it is in that side of the draw. Derbyshire hosting Glamorgan, Gloucestershire, Leicester, Middlesex, Northampton, Merchant Taylors, and Yorkshire have got another Scarborough game against Sussex, which will be important for them. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happened this week with Jay Shah. I'm going to skip over that and save it for Jeff and me next week. There's some quite important, meaty stuff there. I don't want to do it in a 2-minute drill. What I do want to say, though, is that there was a brilliant test match. Last thing we'll do here, Daniel, a brilliant test match in Guyana, which South Africa won by 40 runs to win the series 1-0. Got to love a close thriller. 160 all out South Africa. Dane Pete, top scoring at number 10. They were 97 for 9 at one stage. Early on, Jaden Seals running a mark. I'm not sure if you saw that ball he bolted. Tony Dazorzi, who's probably in that the team of players who have got the most satisfying names to pronounce that we sometimes go into on the Surrey stream. Tony Dazorzi. There with Yudhishika Prabodani, who we referred to earlier today. All the Prendergast might get in there too, Then, Shamar Joseph took Pfeiffer. Can't keep that man down for long. But then the Windies had a similar first innings, all out 144. Jason Holder kept it together with 54. Shamar Joseph, 25 at number 11. Can't believe he's still batting number 11. We are Mulder and Scully, took 4 for. But then South Africa, much better second time, make 246. But, it's still game on, right? It's broadly in the balance. Seals 6 for 61. Love this. Hitting outside edges at the top and stumps at the end. Like he's just about ready, I reckon, Seals to become one of the most important fast swing bowlers in the world. I hope so anyway. It left the Windies 263 to win the series. What a setup. But at 1 for 54, there was the decisive moment where Brathwaite was out league before wicket to Mulder. I feel like, Daniel, to get to 263, the Windies need Brathwaite to bat probably the whole way through. Doesn't happen. They're all out for 222. Rabada and Maharaj finish it off, and South Africa get the points. They're still a long way back in World Test Championship terms because they effectively conceded 2 Test matches to New Zealand earlier this year. But yeah, that I love the idea that there was, after the first test was a rain-affected drab draw, to have a thrilling 3-day test where all results were possible. Well, not the draw, of course, but the other 3 were possible all the way to the end, and a 40-run result. That's a cracker.
But also Guyana, which is traditionally over the history of Test cricket, not been the easiest place to force results. And it all came down, ultimately, didn't it, to the first innings 10th-wicket partnership. And you sensed it a little bit at the time when I saw 97 for 9 had become 160, and then the Windies had collapsed themselves to 97 for 7. You just thought, that's the chance gone away. Yeah. But they kept it. And after the insults, really, and the lack of respect that they were shown, I thought, through a lot of the England series, I didn't think people watching were going, they're no good. Why are we having to watch this? Cricket's rubbish at the moment. And it just wasn't true. They were with England on occasions in that series, but England are a strong team, and the West, especially at home, and the West Indies are learning. So it would have been great, I think, for them to have got over the line, because South Africa is that their 10th series in a row or something against the West Indies that they've won. But, if the West Indies had won, you know what cricket fans would have done? They'd have gone, it's the death of Test cricket in South Africa. So there's no way of satisfying people. Let's just be joyful and rejoice in another really good Test match.
Daniel, you be joyful and rejoice in your time in Manchester. It's been delightful speaking with you. You've got another podcast to get to, as is the way with you, being the great podcast freelancer that you are. It's all been for Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City, more extra, less ordinary. It's all been for our patrons, patreon.com/thefinalword. Join up, be with us, help us do things like this and other shows and other types of programming that we like to do around the year. We made 250 shows last year. That doesn't happen unless we remain independent, and that's all due to Patreon. So jump on there. Story time coming after the Test match. That'll be Jeff and me. I've got a cricket match to go to. You've got a train to catch tomorrow. I look forward to hearing your daily shows with Cam. For England, Sri Lanka, there'll be the next episodes in the feed. That's us done. Cheers. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.